Remember the passion you felt doing that particular thing you always loved to do when you were a kid? Whether it was to laugh or to love or to explore, to play or create. Those passions weren't just you being a kid. They were gifts of clarity. They're the desires of your heart authentically expressed. Hi, I'm Courtney Cole, and this is the Love Freq podcast where we remember who we really are and what we've come to this planet to create. It's here we make a choice. Love or fear. It's here we choose to vibrationally realign ourselves with the truth of our essence, love, 528 hertz, the love frequency, which therefore allows us to realign with conscious healing, authenticity, and creativity. Don't freak out. This is your true nature.
Hey, all you freaks. Welcome back to the Love Freq podcast. This week, I am bringing you superstar basketball trainer and best-selling author, Idan Ravin. He has such a cool story, and he went to law school. He became a lawyer, hated it, but always had a love for basketball and found every possible way to make doing what he loves his living. Many know him as the Hoops Whisperer because he has these unique ways of inspiring and training his NBA and WNBA clients to develop and expand their skills. I read one article about him that says he even uses a metaphysical approach in his training, which I think is really, really cool. But his mission is really helping athletes transform into their best self. And obviously these methods work because he's worked with some of the world's biggest NBA and WNBA superstars. You might have heard of a few of them like LeBron James, Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony, J.R. Smith, Kevin Durant, Dwight Howard, and the beloved Kobe Bryant. May he rest in power and peace. Idan has two books he recently released that everyone should check out, one being The Hoops Whisperer and the other a children's book called It Takes Patience. And both of them have the overall theme that our potential is unlimited if we can just stay dedicated, consistent, if we can trust our intuition, and ultimately allow ourselves to expand into our greatness. He's been featured in Wall Street Journal, Men's Health, Sports Illustrated, New York Times, to name a few. And he's here to share his story and his insight and train us in how we can transform and align with our best self. So aren't we lucky? Idan, what's up? Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you for the intro. I should hire you as my PR person.
Hey, I like being people's hype man, you know?
Yeah, you do a great job for sure.
You can't see Idan right now, but he is sitting over the High Line in New York, and it just looks so peaceful and beautiful. Like, I'm so jealous of you.
Thank you for having me. So ask away. I'm an open book.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, you have such an inspiring story and one that I know that I definitely relate to. And I'm sure a lot of listeners out there can relate to as well. But it's one of striving and seeking and discovering and failing and then reinventing and ultimately, aligning with that greatness, the potential, your actualized self. And I'd love for you to just dig in and tell your story and tell us how you got to where you are today.
Well, like there's the 5-second answer when people ask me like how I got where I am. And I said, I found something I love to do and I was stubborn enough to believe I can do it. The more long-winded answer is that when I tell people that I train professional basketball players, they kind of look at me like I'm speaking Turkish. I'm about 6 feet tall and they weigh about 180 pounds. And when standing next to the NBA players I train, people think I'm either their accountant, their lawyer, their financial advisor, their manager, their agent, their publicist. Sometimes I even get confused as their stylist because I think I dress okay, but never, ever their trainer, I never played college basketball, never played Division I college basketball, Division II college basketball, Division III college basketball, Division IV college basketball. The last time I played organized basketball was back in high school, where I went to a religious Jewish school, where back then I wore a yarmulke playing against other teams with boys that also wore yarmulkes. And back then my only dream was to see Duke University coach Mike Krzyzewski and North Carolina coach Dean Smith, walking down the sidelines, both wearing yarmulkes, arguing over whose scholarship I was going to take. But obviously that never happened, And even though my parents are Jewish, we don't know the other famous Jewish families in professional sports. I can assure you that NBA commissioners Adam Silver and David, I can't believe I just forgot his name, do not come to my house for Friday night Shabbat dinners, And even though, even though a lot of the league is Jewish, I don't know any of those people. I'm not the son, the uncle, the nephew, the godson, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the cousin, the uncle, the homeboy, the former teammate of anyone in professional sports, which is usually how people get a job in that space.
Sure.
And despite not having any of those sort of typical credentials, I found a way to carve a niche for myself doing what I love, because I found that I was able to rely on my own intuition and my own sort of cleverness. Um,
Mm.
and so, growing up, I grew up in a religious home. My mom is from Israel, my dad is from Russia, and they devoted their whole entire life to teaching some form of Jewish education, whether that's rabbinical commentary or the Old Testament or Hebrew literature or Judaic studies. And I went to like very, very religious Jewish schools. And I kind of turned myself into a really good basketball player because it was something that just made sense to me, and it didn't require my parents to spend money they didn't have. So after school, I'd go to the park and I would just literally teach myself the game. I'd take photos from Sports Illustrated to teach myself what it looks like to shoot the ball. And I teach myself how to run and how to dribble and how to sprint. And I literally just turned myself into a really good athlete and a really good basketball player. And when I had opportunities to explore playing basketball past high school, my parents looked at me and they said to me, that's not what you do. So growing up the way I did, you could become a rabbi, a cantor, a lawyer, a teacher, an engineer, an accountant, or a doctor. So I did what a good Jewish boy was supposed to do, and I buried basketball in my backyard like it was my pet goldfish. And I went ahead and I became a lawyer. But me as a lawyer, it just didn't work for me. I wasn't really good at it, and it was not what I wanted to do. And when you tend to grow up religious the way I do, you sort of tend to see things and like everything in a form of prayer and answer. So I remember I would sit behind my big lawyer desk, staring at the big pile of lawyer work, wearing my big lawyer suit, and I would just clasp my hands together and I would pray. And I would pray that God would like send down like a lightning bolt, like a yellow Post-it on it. And the yellow Post-it would have like a blueprint for my future. And it would tell me, Don, you're supposed to go from A to B to C to D.
Sounds a
And I'm a
lot like
patient,
my prayers.
yeah, and I'm a patient person, right? And I would wait for that lightning bolt and I would wait for that yellow Post-it note, but it never came. And so to self-medicate from all the sort of the anxiety and frustration I felt before work, I'd always go to this local YMCA and I would swim a lot in the morning and I would run a lot. And then it would kind of calm me down so I could sit behind a desk for 10 hours. So one day as I was leaving the gym, I saw an ad on a corkboard for a 12-year-old boys basketball team. And I thought, oh man, I could do this. I could volunteer 2 times a week and get out of the office for a little bit. So I jotted down the number and I came back to the office and I volunteered. But since my billable hours were low, I had to convince the managing partner that he should let me leave the office early. So what I did was I paid for the jerseys and I had the name of the firm stenciled on the back, so it looked like it was a bit of business development. And he
Wow.
said, "Okay, that's no problem." So I left the office a couple hours a week, and I started volunteering with these kids. Mind you, I never coached anybody before. I never trained anybody before. And what I did was I just gave the kids drills I had created for myself when I was a kid. They were running drills, they were agility drills, they were conditioning drills, they were shooting drills, they were dribbling drills. And I gave them to these kids. And then after a couple of weeks, parents started calling me and they'd say, Idan, I don't know what you're doing with my son. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? And they're like, my son is difficult. He's a spaz. He gets detention, but he's so incredibly focused and he can't wait to come to your practices. And I thought, well, maybe I know more than like the dad who's coaching his son's team, right? And so we went undefeated that season. And at the end of the season, a parent called me. She said, would you come to practice early one day? So I did. I got to practice early and I saw there were a bunch of red cups and pizza boxes stationed at this picnic table. And all the kids had pooled their allowance money to throw me a pizza party. And I thought, wow, this is kind of strange because 12-year-old boys should be buying video games, not throwing a pizza party for someone who shouldn't be eating pizza in the first place, right? And then a parent pulled me aside afterwards and she said, I don't know what you're doing, but I've never seen my children so engaged in anything before. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just a good teacher because I inherited a teaching gene from my parents. So I kept on volunteering with these kids whenever I had time. And then one day I remember coming to the office and the senior partner had called and left a voice message on my phone. And I went into his office to see him. And he's the kind of guy that like always had you on edge. Like I could be walking down the hallway and he could say to me, Don, what time is it? And I'd be like, London time, Paris time, or New York time. I mean, like I was always like, what does this guy want from me, right? So go into his office and he's holding my memo in his hand. He's kind of kind of waving it like it's the Confederate flag or something. Like he's angry, right? And so he asked me a question, I answer it, and he proceeds to ask me the same question about 10 times, each time escalating his voice another decibel. By the 11th time, I was like, hey man, why are you busting my balls? If you want me to change this memo, I will. If you don't, I won't. So he picked up the phone. I know what he was doing. He was calling human resources to kind of file a complaint that I was being insubordinate. I stormed out of the office.
Oh
I
no.
typed up a letter of resignation and I quit. And it was as if 10,000 pounds of the worst smelling dog poop was removed from my favorite pairs of Air Jordans. You know? And I was like, oh my God, I feel so relieved. I feel so relieved. I'm like, I don't have to be a part of this anymore. So I move home and I'm kind of taking advantage of this bit of a break. And in the meantime, I'm trying to find other jobs, but I'm getting no bites. You know, I'm like, maybe business, maybe this, maybe that. And everyone's telling me, no, 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 no. And so my mom just keeps on insisting I go back to law, but I just didn't like law. But ultimately, like I feel like I'm a good Jewish boy, a good son. So after several months, I took a position at a law firm, and um, I didn't realize it back then, but it was if I had gone, from the ghetto to the White House. It was an extraordinary place with extraordinary people. I got to see the world. They paid me pretty decent. It was very respectful. But when I took all the lipstick off of it, it was still the practice of law, and law just didn't do it for me. But while I was there, I ended up running into a couple guys that I used to play basketball with in the park. And years later, they were taller, bigger, faster. Now they were playing professionally overseas. I think maybe one was in Italy, one was in France. And so I said to them, let's go to the gym and work on a few things. Never in a million universes that I ever imagined it would take me to where I am today. And I put them through drills I had created for myself when I was a kid. There were some running drills, there were conditioning drills, there were agility drills, there were basketball related drills. And they really liked it. They said, can we come back tomorrow? I was like, oh my God, you want to come back tomorrow? Yeah, sure, of course. So then for the next 3 years, I gave every amount of free time I could to whoever called me. Like it could be late in the morning, early in the morning, on the weekends, you name it. I probably just gave thousands and thousands of hours to whoever asked to want to meet me in the gym. And I never thought anything about think of it because it was just giving me so much joy. So I remember like 3 years later, I'm having lunch with my mom, and she asked me in a really thick Hebrew accent if I charge the players that I work with. And I thought, oh my gosh, I couldn't even like think about that because my entire life I'd been making money doing what I hated. I couldn't imagine getting paid to do what I would otherwise do for free. And so I just thought about it, and my mom was right. And my mom quotes Deuteronomy and Genesis, but my mom and dad don't really give you financial wisdom, right? And my mom said, you're only worth what they're willing to pay for you. She was right. I just didn't have the
Oh.
courage to even talk about that. So maybe 6 months had passed. I finally got a call from an NBA player, and he asked me if I would work with him, and I said sure. And at the end of the conversation, I said as fast as I could, pay me whatever you think this is worth to you. He could have paid me with some Twizzlers, a slice of carrot cake, half a dozen chocolate chip cookies, some
Sounds
Starbucks.
good to me.
I would have been super happy. I could have turned around and shown my mom that bag of sugar, and she could have left me alone. And I ended up working with him. And then that week, we were sitting down having lunch, and he handed me a white envelope that he pushed across the table. And I opened the white envelope, and it was a check that had more zeros than I had ever seen. And I felt so uncomfortable. I pushed the check back. I said to him, I can't accept this. I would have done this for free. I do this for free. And he said, no, no, no. This is what you're worth to me. This is what I want. I say thank you for. And I couldn't accept the money. It was if we were playing like paper football. Remember in 8th grade, you'd push the paper football back and forth. It's like what we were doing for minutes at a time. I just didn't feel comfortable taking this money because
Wow.
I didn't feel like I had earned it, because I would have literally done this for free. This wasn't work to me. This was just total joy. And afterwards, he was like, no, Idan, I insist that you take it. This is what you meant to me. And at that moment, it was very poignant when I look back because it represented this very long, convoluted internship I had in myself. I had finally developed a methodology, a philosophy, something I could monetize, something I could quantify, an expertise. And then shortly thereafter, I quit law and kind of haven't looked back ever since. And since that time, I've had the good fortune of training some of the most amazing athletes in the world, some of the most amazing entertainers in the world, some of the most amazing people in the world. I've had the opportunity to write books, to be on television, to share, to create, to consult, all these sort of like beautiful, beautiful gifts that opened up just because like I felt like I had the courage to fly, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's you're gonna make me cry. It's incredible. Like,
No, it's heartfelt.
well, it is, and I feel like it's just so in alignment with you. It's just you're getting to do what every single person on this planet is striving to do every single day, and you figured out a way to do it, and that's why you're here. It's like why I'm talking to you because so many of us, are striving to do those things and to see people doing it gives us all hope, and you are one of those
Yeah, I
people.
appreciate
And
it. I think I always have tears talking about it because I always feel so grateful.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm listening to your story and I'm just blown away. You haven't heard this yet, but at the beginning of each podcast episode, I play the same intro because it's so important to me. And I say in the intro, I say, um, remember the passions you felt when you were a kid. Those passions aren't just you being a kid. They're gifts of clarity, and they're the desires of your heart authentically expressed. And I really, really believe that when I was a kid, gosh, like I was creating every chance that I could get. And I'm looking at my setup now. I have my light and I'm doing a podcast. I have my microphone. I'm doing music. I have my guitar over here. Like these things haven't changed. I just want to create. And yours was basketball,
Yeah,
And so I believe that all these passions are these roadmaps to actualizing our potential, and they show
yeah,
you which direction to take.
sure. And I think also that for me, basketball is it's been almost more of like an art to me because I
Yep.
don't. There's something, when people say, "What do you do with the athletes?" I say to them, "I create symmetrical perfection." Like there's things I look at to make sure things become beautiful. It's not
Mm.
whether the ball goes in the basket. That doesn't matter to me. It's just more like it's just things just have to become beautiful. Beautiful in their movement, beautiful in their preparation, beautiful in their performance. Like that's literally what I'm trying to do is always make something beautiful.
Is it
And
almost like a flow?
it's
It's
it's there's that sort of metaphysical flow, but there's also this there's almost like I'm looking for like a beautiful flow of water, like just kind of just has sort of continuity and movement and continuity and sequence. Like there's just no ripple, right?
mm,
So when like look, I've had the good fortune of working with so many great players, and when I see Stephen Curry do something that I know we spent years doing, and he does it just beautifully, I go, that's the continuity of the water, right? From the minute like it started 30 seconds before and it finishes 30 seconds after. Like water just stop, it just continues to flow. And I think those are the things that I look for when I train athletes. It's like uh, there is like there's the small elements that you build, but hopefully with the hope of sort of creating continuity. So when you sing a beautiful note, people think you're just hitting a note, but it's not. It's the 5 minutes before the note, it's the 5 minutes after the note, and it's the 30 years of practice that you went into building the note. Right? That is the
wow.
art in like what you do, and I feel like in kind of what I'm seeking to do as well. And I think what ended up happening is that the more like I started realizing that I was building my own sort of like sculptures, and that kind of made me realize like that writing is an extension of that as well, and creating is an extension as well. Like they're all pretty much sort of like consistent with who I am. It's about sort of this idea of like storytelling and creativity and art that's all sort of combined, this idea between sport and spirituality and performance, if that all makes sense.
That makes 100% sense. And I'm not a basketball player. I'm not a sports person. In fact, I used to play softball and I would eat the grass in the outfield. My dad would yell at me every time. I was just always in the head in the clouds. I'm not an athletic person really in that way. But I do understand that from my journey and, really dedicating time and seeing the consistency and how it's benefited me. It's almost like turning on a faucet consistently and just like letting it flow and just becoming the greatness that I've worked for and worked
Look,
towards.
when you watch someone play guitar, right, there is the very granular approach that people can see, that the fingers like sort of strumming on the chords. Then if you really like take very very like far steps away, there's something incredible about how all those fingers move together, about how the foot is pounding to kind of keep the beat, how the person is bobbing their head, how like there's a performance, like there's all these different pieces that come together to create this beautiful piece of art, not just finger strumming a chord. And I
Mm-hmm.
think oftentimes what happens, I think, in sports is that people become very granular in this. Like they
Yeah.
want to look at a hook on the rim, or they want to look at the net, or where the ball goes in the basket. And to me, that's
Mm-hmm.
all that is so completely insignificant. There's incredible beauty and understanding every time like a sneaker squeaks on the wood floor, it's making a proper sound.
Mm.
If it squeaks properly, that means you've cut properly. If it doesn't squeak, you didn't cut properly. Like there's such a
Wow.
sensory experience that I find that when you really get good at this, like you're able to see that there's so much to this. So again, like I think it applies to everything that we do. It's just the better you get at it, the more you realize like how complex it is and how many more things are involved. And oftentimes I'll give people an example because they think I see this a lot in fitness. Like people think it's all about a drill. So on social media, you see lots of people put gimmicky exercises or gimmicky this or, like, and I'm thinking, gosh, it's so much more than an exercise, so much more than a drill. And people say, well, why? And my example is I watch the Food Network a lot because I find food really interesting. And
Yeah.
if Emeril Lagasse and I had the same cut of steak, the same salt, the same pepper, the same oven, the same temperature, I can assure you his steak will taste 1,000 times better than mine. Why? Because there's something that he does in the process that is so innocuous, but is so meaningful. You don't even realize it, but he could be flicking the pepper off his third finger that lands on the perfect piece on the steak that just the most important piece on the meat to tenderize the meat. Like there's something that they do which is so much more sophisticated and so much more involved than anything that we ever see because they've been doing this whole life and they put so much effort into it. And to me, it's the same thing, this idea of like, it's not about a drill. It's about all the stuff that goes into the drill and all the thoughtfulness and all the expertise and all the experience, right? It's like,
Mm,
you know, there's people have a beautiful voice and there's people who are performers,
absolutely.
right? It's two different
Absolutely.
things, right?
Yep.
There's people who can master a drill. There's people who can score 4 goals, for Inter Milan when they're right. So there's just so much more complexity associated with like art or sports or fitness that only over time and only with commitment and real devotion do you really get to uncover.
I love that. And that's really what you're talking to is working toward and actualizing potential, in a way.
Sure. Yeah.
And we all know what potential initially is. Potentially. We all potentially know what that is. Making a joke there. But, to you, like, what is potential? And do you think that we encompass our full potential from the moment we're born, or is that something that is actualized?
I don't know. I don't. Potential is a strange word to me. I just think like I don't. I, I think we're sort of all kind of able to do everything,
Right.
right? And so I think it's just how much you're willing to do and sacrifice and how much bandwidth you have, right? So oftentimes I think potential is sort of narrowly defined. Like there's plenty of athletes I work with who never thought they would ever play in the NBA because in ninth grade they were cut from their high school team. And I can assure you there's plenty of incredible musicians who never thought they would win a Grammy either, right? So,
It's so true, yeah.
right. So I don't, is it the potential or is it really, I don't even like the word potential. I'd rather just people just live with a life of devotion, right? And wherever
Yeah,
that devotion takes you, to me, is like that's like the finish line,
sure,
right?
sure.
Versus, like kind of these sort of goals that kind of will move and change all the time, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess the goal is to live a very fulfilled, devoted, happy, present life, right? Um, and then whatever gravy comes from that, awesome, right? But it
Yeah.
doesn't like my potatoes taste like less good if I don't have a lot of gravy on them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's kind of
Yeah.
what that's how I see it. So like, look, I've had the good fortune of training some amazing musicians, right? And never once in our time together do they talk about winning Grammys,
Really.
right? They're never. Their goal is just to make like really beautiful music that lives forever. Like I can't
Mm,
imagine Ray Charles or Elton John or Billy Joel sat down and like or the Beatles sat down in front of their keyboard and thought, I want this song to win me $42 million. And they never quite crossed their mind. Their
sure.
goal is just to make beautiful things all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And there's probably people that are listening to us right now going like, "Oh yeah, like yeah, it takes dedication and doing what you love." But then there's the other side of it, which I know that you felt, I know that I felt,
Right.
where it's like, "Okay, well, there's a point where we have to grow up and we have to make money and we have to get a job."
Sure.
And
So
there's people that
yes.
are in jobs right now that they absolutely hate and they're like, "I would
Okay.
absolutely love to take the leap and do this and
Okay.
have the dedication, but I have to provide for my family or I have to."
Sure.
What would you tell those people?
Okay. So this is a very like beautiful segue into why I wrote my children's book.
Yeah.
And so the children's book is called It Takes Patience. And for a long time, I had this story in my head um, that I wanted to tell, and I just didn't know in what format to tell it. So I remember years ago, I was speaking to an audience, and a woman asked me, "How do you go from being a lawyer to training Carmelo Anthony?" And I go, it's like kind of it's like finding your cornbread. And the lady's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, imagine like you love making cornbread, right? You're not really good at it, but you just love doing it, and you do it a lot. And for a couple of years, you're making cornbread, and it probably doesn't taste very good. But maybe in the year 3, you start making cornbread, and you'd be like, God, that's actually kind of good.
Yeah.
And then finally, like, you share it with your mom. She's like, that's really good. And then the next year, you get more confidence with your cornbread. Now you start adding jalapenos to it. You start adding like honey to it. You start like kind of sort of like being a little bit more free with your cornbread. And then you have a dinner party and people come over and you share your cornbread. They go, "Oh my God, your cornbread is really good." And you're like, "Oh my God, thanks so much." And then the next year you start, you know what? I'm going to put my cornbread into cupcake tins. Maybe that'll be different. And you have another dinner party and they go, "Oh my God, that cornbread is really, really good." And you're smiling, you're just having fun making your cornbread. And then one day you're going to have another dinner party and someone's going to say, "Hey, um, can I introduce you to someone?" You're like, "Sure, sure, sure." And they're going to introduce you to someone and they ask, if you could bake some cornbread from them. And let's call her Lily. And Lily asks, "Will you buy, can you make me some cornbread?" She says, "Sure, of course. I'd love to make you 2 loaves of cornbread." And then all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, you're going to go to your mailbox and there's going to be a white envelope in the mailbox. And Lily had paid you for your cornbread.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
what I truly, truly believe is that when you're devoted to something, truly devoted to something, eventually it'll get good. And eventually it'll get to a point where it's so good that you don't even have to ask, someone will pay you for it. And when I
Mm.
wrote It Takes Patience, the idea was it's about a little girl who lives in the Appalachian Mountains with her mother and her grandmother. And her grandmother, she loves her grandmother's cornbread. And this idea was her grandmother gives her like an order. She says, "Patience, I want you to find your cornbread." And the little girl spends the time in the book trying to figure out how to make cornbread for herself. The ultimate message is that there is no right, there's no wrong. It's about devotion. It's about your own struggle. It's about your own self-reliance. It's about your own creativity. And eventually you'll find your cornbread. So yes, are
Mm.
there realities of life about having to pay the bill? Sure, absolutely. But it doesn't mean that in your spare time you can't find your cornbread, right? That to
Absolutely.
me is living a full life, right? And I'll swear this on everything I believe in. Ultimately, one day, when you get really good at it, I don't know if it's tomorrow or in 6 months or 6 years, there will be someone who says to you, "I'd like to pay you for your cornbread." Whether
Mm.
that's your music, whether that's mowing the lawn, whether that's training them at the gym, whether that's like something, someone will offer to pay. And at that moment, you will have found your cornbread.
That is so powerful, Idan, because I'm sitting here thinking about myself and I'm thinking about the times, and I know that people out there are thinking the same thing. They're stuck in this job. They have to pay the bills and
Sure,
they're
sure,
waiting. They're waiting, waiting, waiting. They're doing the thing and they're doing a job they hate and they're going, "Gosh, I don't know how much longer I can be
sure. But
patient or if this ever going to come, you know?" And to me,
guys,
you get to a point where you're like, "Wow, I feel like a failure." You know?
no, the thing is that it's about finding the joy in what you're doing. Like, yes, like, do people have jobs they have to? Of course, right? But that's why I always encourage people before you come up with a business plan and raising funds and all that. Just find something small that you enjoy and just give it some time.
Mm,
Not everyone's
absolutely.
supposed to be Mark Zuckerberg, and not everyone's supposed to be Bill Gates, and not everyone's Aretha Franklin.
Yeah,
It's life, right?
100%.
But I tell you what, like I can assure there's someone everywhere, everyone who's listening to this, someone likes something, no matter how silly it might be,
Yep.
right? And
And may
just
might feel like they can't do it because it is too silly
it's
or
silly. Just give it time because there is joy in that. Because you find joy in that. Maybe it's you like bowling. I don't know what it is, right? Maybe you like polishing bowling balls. But if you give it enough time, one day you're going to be good at it. One day you're going to be really good at it. And one day someone's going to offer you something for it.
Wow.
That doesn't mean you're a millionaire. That doesn't mean something. But I will promise you, it's about becoming devoted to what you enjoy. And
And
there
I
is
think
joy in that devotion.
yeah, and I think that you're so right. It just takes the patience. And when we give up too quickly and
Yeah.
we don't have the patience, that's when that feeling of failure comes. And I've seen you talk about this online, and I'd love for you to talk about here. You talk about someone asked you, what is failure? And I'd love for you to kind of go into that and talk about what failure is to you, and if it really is failure really failure?
I don't know. I think failure to me is like when you just don't have the willingness to try, right? Like I don't measure failure by a bad game or like a bad like song or that's I think it's just about kind of an effort and a trial. Like um shit, there's lots of stuff I'm not really good at. And there's lots of stuff I took me a long time to get pretty good at, you know? Like I probably wrote the Who's Whisperer 1,000 different times. Like I'm not a Pulitzer Prize winning, Harvard educated, Masters of the Fine Arts like writer. No, but my failure would have been never trying, like um, and I found that oftentimes I don't have the patience to wait on someone to give me a gift.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just try to do it myself, right?
See,
So
that's the cool thing too, and that's what I love about you. And is you weren't, maybe you weren't, or maybe you were naturally gifted at basketball, I don't know, but growing up, but you read the articles and you were doing the research to make yourself
myself, yeah,
better.
I found joy in it, right? With no destination other than like I just found real joy in it. And like I struggle like everyone else in living in the moment and being present. God, absolutely I struggle with that. But looking back, when I'm in the gym and when I was in the gym, like time seemed to stop. Like it just felt so joyful. No matter I'm sure when you sing as well, right?
Yeah.
And like I know there's something that we hear that all the time that sounds so cliche and so like what is living in the moment? It's just like, gosh, it's just really just breathing in that joy, you know?
Being in
And
that
I
joy
remember,
and giving it a chance, not
yeah,
quitting, not quitting, letting it expand and learning.
sure. Like I know this will sound like kind of a weird description, but it's the only way I can explain it. And I've been sort of doing virtual training with clients, and when I had the opportunity to see one in person, after all this time not seeing them, I felt like I could chew the air. Like it
Mm.
felt so absolutely extraordinary to be around, like in front of them, and like it felt because I was so removed, right? And like it just felt like I was so present. I felt like the air had a taste to it. Like
Wow.
my like everything just felt like
Alive.
alive, And I think through these tough times that we're all dealing with, it's part of what I've been trying to do is just kind of remember that, right?
Yeah,
And just,
of course.
and like find joy in those small moments and find joy in my devotion and find joy in my exploration. And gosh, like, you know, whether we make $1 with our gift or whether we make $1 trillion with our gift, like, who cares?
Yeah, it is
You
true. And you might have to have another job along the way, but I
know?
I really feel like failure is not failure in a sense of, yes, if you quit, you fail because you didn't try, right? So you're not going to,
It
it's
never
not going to
started.
it never
Never
started.
started. Yeah.
Exactly. But I feel like when you get a job, in one thing, or for me, I'm like, wow, this seemed really pointless at the time, but I learned this skill because I needed it here. And it kind of like evolved that purpose a little bit. There was actually a lady that was on my podcast a couple weeks ago. And she said this quote by Patrice Washington. She said purpose evolves, and it's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
when you keep trying and striving, you gain all of these skills in the process.
And I think also when we look at a job as a dead end job, I think we're also not being in the moment and not being grateful either, right? Because
Ooh, great point.
it is that job that helps you pay the rent, and it is that job that lets you pay for groceries, and it is that job that lets you spend 4 hours on a Saturday playing music, right? So all those things, like, gosh, there's people in the world who are really suffering, you know.
Yeah.
So the idea
Yeah.
that we have a shitty job, okay, I've had shitty jobs too, but
Yeah.
it's temporary, right? And it allows you to
Temporary.
do lots of different things in the meantime, right? And I
Yep.
think it's just about I don't know, this like sort of exercise in gratitude, this exercise in presence, this exercise in um, knowing that it's arrogant to think you'll be good in the beginning. I worked with this very, very, very famous guy, right? And he would get so frustrated in our first couple sessions. And I said, man, if you've been doing this 10 years, you're entitled to be frustrated. But right now, that's just arrogance and entitlement,
Wow. Yeah. Great point.
right?
And that's something to work through.
Yeah, it's just like, this takes a long time to get good at this. right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of like take a deep breath and realize this is just part of like getting better at this, you know?
Yeah, and there's a cool point. There's a cool side to that, or like using something like that as a focal point for growth. And like gaining tools that are necessary along the way in our growth. Like they point out places that we need healing or places that we need to kind of develop emotionally, like
Sure.
using kind of our passions and some of those challenges as tools.
Right. And I think like, our potential is not like, to use your word, is not just in your music, right? Our potential is just like in everything that we do, right?
Yes,
Like
exactly.
it is being fully actualized, right? It is being a better husband or wife. It is being a better sibling. It is better being a better person. It's being a better friend, right?
Yep.
Like important things like that, right? And
100%.
I think that sometimes if we those sort of outward looking tasks kind of give us a little bit more perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like when I feel down, look, I'm not trying to sound self-righteous or anything, but I try to do a lot of sort of introspection to feel better as well.
Of
And there are
course.
moments if I feel down and like I'll make sure to find something for that homeless person to eat,
Yeah. It
right?
feels good. It feels
Just feels
like you're
the right,
giving, you're
right. Like
loving.
here I am feeling sorry, and this person doesn't even have food to eat. You know what I mean? So I think those outward shaping activities and things just kind of give us perspective that
Yes.
this is that we're pretty should be pretty grateful we can even pursue a dream.
Absolutely. Hey, I asked you what failure was to you.
Yeah.
Now, alternatively, what is success or greatness? What is that
Uh,
to you?
Greatness is, is just on a sports level, it's feeling invincible.
Mm,
It's like
going for it.
it's not going for. It's like you've you've gotten so good that no situation will fluster you. That you're prepared for everything, and you're the best at it in every single way. Like there's something about basketball which is very unique to me because like the situations are always changing, right? Like the game sequence and no one's going to stand in the same place every single time the same way, right? Like versus track and field where it's like a linear race when there's no one in front of you, you know? And so to me, being able to be such a ninja that no matter what situation you see, you still are fantastic, right?
Yeah.
And then I think when people ask me like, what else is greatness to me? Greatness is also no matter how hard it is to get to the top, it's even harder to stay there.
Mm,
And when I see like certain athletes, like look, I've had the good fortune of working with LeBron James a little bit. He's absolutely extraordinary. I don't think people understand. He's been in the NBA 17 years, and he's always at the top.
yep.
Like, I don't think it's one thing to be like, I mean, to be a best-selling like musician 2 years in a row, but to do it for
Sure.
17 years,
Sure. It's not easy.
it's not. It's like you're constantly reinventing yourself, and that to me is like extraordinary greatness, right?
Yep.
And I think um, but we all have different levels of greatness, right? There's one LeBron James, like there's one Michael Jackson, like there's one Madonna, like there's one Bono, or there's one Picasso. I mean, there's one, right?
Sure.
But I think we all sort of like um, me selfishly. I hope people care so much that they all want to find their own greatness,
Whatever
um,
that may be,
whatever
and like
that.
you said, it's not greatness. It's not just about actualizing your job, like you said, like getting the perfect job. It's about actualizing yourself and your full potential of all that you are at the core.
Sure,
And then maybe a great job will follow that. But it's just like
sure.
really, like we said, actualizing yourself, being the
Look,
best you can be.
the one thing that when people say to me like, "What is really unique about high-level, world-famous professional athletes?" and I'll say to you, when you're in a room with them or you first meet them, there's almost that there is a like a glow around each of them. It's like a circle that sort of encompasses them. That when they walk into a room, there's something very special about them. Like it's like they're superhuman, like almost cartoon characters. Like there's this invincibility of like this yellow glow that they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when younger players ask me like, what makes Steph Curry so special? I just tell them he has that yellow glow. But what makes him even more spectacular is that he doesn't even know he has it.
Wow, that's a
And it's
great
his
point.
humility
Yeah.
which is just extraordinary. It's his modesty, his kindness. He's gentle, and he doesn't even know that he has his yellow glow, right?
Mm,
But whoever comes around and you feel it, right? But what
yeah.
makes him so unusual is that he doesn't even know he has it, right? So to me, if you're asking me like what would be the most amazing thing, is to be so extraordinary to not even know you have it, right?
Wow. Because then if you don't even know you have it, then it keeps you striving and it makes you even more great.
Yeah,
Right?
and you're not caught up with yourself. Right? I always tell people like, you make sure you smack me if I think I'm too good. Like just
Yeah.
right. Just
We
there's
never peak. We never peak. There's
oh,
there's
humility.
this endless potential.
Yeah. Like humility is extraordinary, right? Like
Yeah,
people who defer
absolutely.
a bit of attention to themselves and like defer to others and like I like I never asked Steph this, but I always wondered this. And like I think I know him well enough to be able to kind of hypothesize. When he would go to the podium after games, he'd bring his daughter with him. And I always thought it was sort of a form of like deferring the attention away from himself, right? So people would
Hmm.
focus on his daughter and other things versus him.
Wow.
It's why like he's just an incredibly unassuming rock star, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like pushing the attention away, even though like
Right.
because it's just not like a normal thing to do, right? I think sometimes athletes bring their children on the stage like that to be able to sort of defer a little bit of the attention away from themselves.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Question
Yeah,
is, do you feel like, I mean, you're training people
yeah,
all the time
yeah.
to become great, to become the best versions of themselves. And
Sure.
is there a template or a clear path that there is to follow in that for you? Or is it just like getting to know the person and it's different for each one?
Um, like I always say, I don't know what I have until I look under the hood, right? And so when you have sort of one-on-one kind of sort of responsibilities for youth athletes, yeah, things are very sort of customized, right? And people's approaches are different, and my approach is different, and programs are different, and all that. If you're asking me, like, is that something that could scale? I tried it in my book, in the Hoops Whisperer book, right? And
Yeah.
just not it wasn't. When people ask me what the book is, I say it's kind of on a macro level, it's about the importance of relying on your intuition and faith, but in a non-religious context, to find your purpose in life. On a micro level, it's sort of about kind of how I went from one universe I didn't really belong in to another universe I didn't really belong in as well. But the book is like designed to kind of in like a series of sort of anecdotes that are lessons, right? That I see as really important in order to be able to find like the best version of yourself or the best version of someone you work with, right?
Hmm.
That again, it's not about a drill; it's about a philosophy, right?
Okay.
So, like one of the chapters I wrote was like, uh, God gives us the ingredients, not the recipe, right?
Mm.
Which is that like everyone's sort of responsible to find their way to make their pizza the best, right? We all have our bread, we all have the sauce, our cheese, our toppings, but how do you want to make it, right? And to me, I think when you build programs for people or when you work with people, it's about understanding like um, how would they enjoy the pizza the most, and how would the pizza make be best for them, right?
What
And
do they want
sometimes
out of it?
sometimes there is no sauce, right? Sometimes there is no bread. Sometimes there is extra cheese, right? It just sort of depends on the person. Um, and I think it's just about being very sensitive to that. I mean, it's no different than when you find an incredible singing coach, right? They're gonna treat you different than they do Beyonce, right? I mean, they just
Absolutely.
right.
It's a different
Everyone sort
instrument.
of has 100%, right? And that's how I've always tried to be this way with my athletes. But at the same time, there's very core principles, right,
Mm.
that are always emphasized, right? Like,
Dedication, consistency.
and even more sort of out of the box, which is you really want to be a motherfucker, you need to be completely unconventional,
Yes.
really. Because if you're not, you're going to be a really good peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but that's not what I do, right?
Right.
You know, to me, it's like you have to be really, really, really unconventional and rethink all your prior ideas of what is training, what is greatness, what is good, what is effort, what is like, how do you treat your teammates, your coaches, and your wife? Like all these things you have to like really rethink. How do you move? How do you run? Right? Especially you've been doing this for 20 years and you become the best in the world. It's really hard on these athletes to be like, Idan, you're asking me to change something I've done my whole life. I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm asking you to change it.
Yeah.
Just rethink, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think like that's one thing. Like I I see so much similarities with like in singing. It's like you're you've done something for so long a certain way, but when a really, really voice coach says to you, try it this way, and it works, you're thinking, oh my God, that's it, right? It's just
Yeah.
this
It
approach
clicks.
is
Yeah.
important. Yes. And so I always try to be very, very unconventional in my approach. One, because I think it's vibed with who I am. And two, I think if you do it like everyone else, you become like everybody else.
Oh, 100%. And then you don't stand out. It's just
So,
like,
yeah.
well,
Yep.
how do I differ from the next guy, And
Yes.
I've been reading up on some of your ways. It does say in some of these articles, that you do have a metaphysical approach to some of your training. I'm so curious. I just want to ask, like, what does that look like? Is it just dealing with
Um,
someone at the core on a spiritual level?
no, I think it's like, you know, it's not introducing to like I don't introduce the material to them in a way that feels metaphysical or Buddhist or like Dalai Lama-ish. I'm not that enlightened a person. But I think that I try to introduce things in a way to them which is different. But if they do it and they're very thoughtful of it, I think it has sort of metaphysical consequences in a very positive way, right? So, um, like I mean, we all do this. We all read about this, but there's something incredibly poignant and metaphysical about learning how to breathe, right? But if you come at someone and in a very sort of uh, like medical, psychological way, talking to them about the importance of breathing, they'll probably be pretty dismissive of it. But if you allow them to sort of discover like the miracle of breathing properly, you just there's a metaphysical response to it. There's a somatic response to it, a physiological response to it, right? That only through their own sort of exploration do they discover. And I think the same
Mm.
way with train, right? You can give very, very unusual drills that they might not understand, but in a couple of weeks, like if they just buy into it, they start realizing, wow, this really is translated into ways I never expected, right?
Right. It's not just aligning with them in a very heady kind of way. It's aligning with them in just all over. Yeah, just energetically
Yeah, like
almost.
for example, like if I knew you had a big, let's say you were going on tour, right, and you asked me to work with you, I might have you wear a weighted vest for 2 weeks while you sing,
Oh, wow.
right? Because it sounds like why? But to me, the
Yeah.
weighted vest is the burden of the audience. It's the burden of the pressure. It's the actual physical burden. Then when you take it off, like it might feel really like alive when you do it.
Freeing. That's
So,
cool. I'm
so
gonna
that's
I'm
what
gonna
I'm
try
saying.
that.
But that's the example of like finding a very unconventional approach that like has a lot of sort of very positive like consequence if you kind of like believe in it. Because yes,
Yeah,
it's
that's
very easy
great.
to just put you on a stage in the studio and have you record, but like I feel like I could really ramp up anyone's training in an unusual way that when they went back to their old self, they feel like they really made big strides.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's really, really, really cool. I know I'm keeping you forever, but I ultimately I love just hearing all that you're talking about on your path to greatness, inspiring others on their path to greatness. And ultimately we're just kind of learning ourselves, and we're
Sure,
learning to use our
sure,
passions in such a way that perfect and
sure.
expand us into who we truly are. And ultimately it's a process, but I feel like it's well worth it.
No, for sure. Look, I'm a very regular person. Like I'm not super tall. I'm not super big. I'm not super muscular. I'm a very regular person. I just found that um, I just chosen to take more of an irregular path. You know, and because of that, like I've had some beautiful highs and some tough lows. Um, but
A
yeah, it's
lot of
like
life in between, though, I
yeah,
can
it's
imagine
a
that's
very joyful life and a very like a life. I tell people I've lived an unimaginable life. Like I've done some of the really, really, really cool shit, right? Because I just, I don't know, I was stubborn, right? And I
Mm.
trusted my instincts and I trusted my intuition, and I didn't have 47 different degrees, and I didn't have all that stuff that everyone says is so necessary, right? Just
Yeah.
something felt right, and I just kept on listening to my belly, you know? So I was like, that sauce tastes right. Even though people told me that sauce doesn't taste very good, right? And I just trusted my sauce and trusted my cheese and trusted my bread. And eventually I made some good pizza, right? And that's why I just
Wow.
encourage people, just no matter what they say, just continue to sort of trust like your gut, because it's not lying to you, right? Especially if you're doing it for
Absolutely.
really right reasons, which it gives you joy. Well, I can assure you that no matter what everyone's telling you, it's probably not right.
Wow. I'm going to leave you guys with that one because that is like a big word right there. Idan, thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much for sharing your wisdom and your greatness. Just I am like inspired to go take the world on today. So
Oh, very kind. Thank you for having me. This has been a joy.
Of course. And you guys be sure to check out his books, The Hoop Whisperer. And if you have any kiddos, or even if you don't, like I love the simplicity in children's books, check out It Takes Patience. They're both on Amazon. He's such an inspiration. And if you want to know more about him, you can go to his website, www.idanravin.com. That's IDANRAVIN.com. And don't forget, you can now stream the Love Freak podcast on Spotify. So go do that. And if you'd like to dive deeper in the content each week, you can check out my partnership with Patreon that offers you weekly journal prompts and other exclusive content to help you in your self-discovery process. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you this time next week on the Love Freak Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Love Freak Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram at @thelovefreak_. Don't forget, that's FREQ. Or to find out more information, you can go to www.thelovefreak.me. Look for a new episode every Tuesday.